Hi, fellow geochemists and geochemistry enthusiasts. Welcome to GeoChemISTea, the only podcast for people who love geochemistry with a side of tea. Our mission is to inspire future geochemists and to introduce our listeners to niche geochemistry topics. I'm your host, Sam Scher, and today's episode is a special one because my guest isn't a geochemist, but I think he's a brother in arms when it comes to making rocks talk. Joining me is Professor Mohsen Yahyaei. Oh my God. Yahyaei.
Yes, very good.
Joining me is Professor Mohsen Yahyaei, director of the Julius Kruttschnitt Mineral Research Center, or the GeoChemISTea, and professor at the University of Queensland. He's a mineral processing engineer and a deep thinker on integrating AI, automation, and advanced modeling into mineral processing and research education. I first met Mohsen at the SEG conference, where I learned something that genuinely humbled me: that mineral processing engineers, the people who actually turn our rocks into metal, often don't use our geological or geometallurgical models. So today we're going to have a bit of a crossover conversation. How do we break down the silos between geologists, geochemists, geometallurgists, and processing engineers? And how do we make geological products that are truly useful all the way down the mining value chain and even adaptable to future autonomous systems? So with that said, Mohsen, welcome to GeoChemISTea.
Thank you very much, Sam, and it's a pleasure to join you for this podcast. I mean, it's not my usual habitat, but I'm very keen.
Honestly, this isn't usual for anybody. So
yes, I agree. So hopefully your guests will like it. Let's see.
We're going to force it upon them, and I think they're going to have to like it.
Yes, okay.
So Mohsen, can you tell us a bit about your journey into mineral processing?
Yes, I mean, as I told you earlier on as well, I think probably I'm one of those, maybe I see myself as a lucky person that actually didn't have much bumpy road into that whole journey that I had. I mean, definitely everybody has that ups and downs, but mine probably was a bit more smoother in terms of, at least I didn't feel any bump into the whole process. But I mean, I started actually with mine exploration because, and it's a funny story actually when I get into that, because I was very keen for traveling. I liked actually to go around the world. I mean, I grew up in Iran and born in Iran as well. So by the time I got to university, I had no idea of the world, where is world and what's happening. But I was very keen to go around the world. And then I thought actually if I become a mechanical engineer who works on ships, then I can basically do that. So I started looking into opportunities there in Iran. And then my dad and my family started opposing very strongly in terms of, no, you shouldn't do that. This is not for us. You're not going to have a family and all of that. And then for me, essentially the plan B was actually look into mine exploration, because I thought actually if I get to mine exploration, at least I get to explore Iran in trying to find mines. And that's why I got into mining exploration as my bachelor. But I think when I got to second to third year, I found that actually most of the things I learned actually is nothing to do with my dream in terms of I'm going to travel around basically the country and then trying to explore things, because what I was reading and all of that didn't really give me that feel. And from there, actually, I started developing interest in process design. And that's where I got introduced to mineral processing for the first time, because I did two elective course, flotation and mineral processing, which was essentially for us as an elective course for mining geologists, mining exploration, basically a major. And then I developed a big interest into that space. And then I moved to essentially mineral processing for my master's, which I did it back in Iran as well. And at that point, actually, I got into automation as well, because I was very interested, and my master's thesis actually was in designing a pilot unit of a flotation unit and then essentially looking into automation. And that's where actually I developed more interest in process control and automation as well. And then I worked for industry for a while as essentially consultant in coal, copper back in Iran, and then iron ore. And then I started thinking about a PhD. Again, my journey in PhD was very interesting because one of my supervisors back in Iran graduated from McGill University in Canada. So he offered to help me actually to get a PhD position in McGill. Given actually I worked in column flotation at the time, McGill was very well known in terms of column flotations and developing technologies and understanding that. But then I did my IELTS exam for English and then did all of my admission. And then my supervisor came with a suggestion. He says, why you don't stay here? Don't go to Canada. Stay here. You can keep your job that you already have and then do a PhD at the same time. And at the time, I was earning a very good money from a Turkish company when I was working with them because they had an operation in Iran. So I said, that's a good idea. By the way, the plan actually didn't change essentially because he said, no, that doesn't work. You have to quit your job and you have to be full-time PhD student. And at the time, actually, I rejected McGee's option as well, so they have no option. So I started full-time PhD there. But at the time, actually, I was very keen to join, to have experience with the center that I'm currently here, called GeoChemISTea or Julius Kruttschnitt Minerals Research Center, because I've read few books about them and I knew what they are doing and what an amazing job they do. So when I was doing my master's, I was super keen to find out how a research center like JK is working in and developing things because I was very much into modeling and all of that. So when I finished my PhD, I was actively looking into, can I get a postdoc position or for a short term to come to GeoChemISTea? And I managed to get that. So my initial plan actually was to come here for maybe 2 or 3 years and then go back to Iran and then do whatever I was doing. And then by the time I came here, actually, the whole life changed because I realized actually this is much bigger than I thought in terms of what do they do. And it's a completely different world compared to what I used to do things. And that was essentially 2011. And here we are 2025 and I'm stuck here somehow. So, but I mean, my journey here was kind of maybe a bit of a linear path because I started as a postdoc. Then because I had lots of operational experience and done some work, then I essentially fast-tracked my career in terms of becoming a senior researcher and then developed my own group here around advanced automation because GeoChemISTea before didn't have a group that dedicated to control. Although when they established the center in 1976, the whole idea that Alvin Lynch actually developed the center was around using computer programming and power of computer for automation. But over the time, the focus of the center was mainly around model development for mineral processing units. And then when I essentially grew up a bit more in the center and developed my essentially connections, then I offered that actually to establish a group that is dedicated to automation. And that was 2017 that actually we kind of officially had a group that looks into advanced automation, which was my passion. And then essentially 3 years ago, I took the directorship position as well to become the director of the center as well, which was something that actually I planned it when I was doing my master's because I thought actually I have to establish a center for myself and be the director of that center that is focused on model development and automation. The only thing that was a different one actually was I thought actually I would do it in Iran. And then I realized, no, I don't have enough essentially base there. And then I said, okay, the plan B is to become the director of GeoChemISTea. And that's where essentially I moved into that. Yes. And it's an interesting story because when the position was open for application, I mean, first time I didn't apply because I didn't think I'm ready. And then the second time that the opportunity came, I did apply. And when they asked me in the interview, why you want to apply for this position, I said, I've been preparing for this role for more than 20 years. And I explained about my journey and where I exposed to GeoChemISTea. So I said, that's the reason that actually I'm applying, because I've been working for that for 20 years now.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, that's so amazing. I guess first thing about both your story um and when I took the course with you at SEG, that I just, and we talk about silos and everything. Um, I went to McGill and I was there pretty much the same time you were applying to there doing my bachelor and undergrad. Uh, oh my God, that's the same thing. My bachelor and my master's there. So we would have crossed over, right? And my point
Yes.
in saying this is that the geology department is upstairs from the mining engineering department.
Yes.
And like, one building over that's connected via underground because it's cold outside is
Yes.
chemistry and some other kinds of like metallurgy. Like the buildings and all of us are all connected. Yet I had no idea that something so profound had come out of McGill like that,
Thank
right?
you.
And I know that it's like a top research university and all these different things. So I don't mean to talk it down. I just mean to talk to the fact that even within university, we had these silos. Like, how
Yes.
cool would that have been to have known something like that? I knew we had a mining engineering department because I taught rocks for jocks
Mm.
as a master's student, which was just basically mineralogy for these guys. But I mean, I had just otherwise just no concept that quote real things
Yes.
were happening at McGill, right? Like, I mean,
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
crazy.
Yes.
So,
I mean, I went actually to McGill 2 years ago because I never been there. Even I've been traveling a lot when I got my position here, which essentially, eventually I fulfilled my dream in terms of being able to travel around the world with coming to GeoChemISTea. That was a key point. But I never been in McGill. And then 2 years ago, when I came to Canada for a conference, I said, actually, I have to go and visit McGill because I was planning to go there. And the buildings that you mentioned, actually, I've been there. I was talking with the professors and all of them, and they are in different location. But it's amazing. I mean, your point is very valid in terms of sometimes lots of amazing things happens actually next door in university, and because you're in a different department or you're not part of that group, you have no idea what's
mm,
happening there. Which is interesting. And sometimes actually those connections actually make sense if there is a relationship. There are lots of much better things comes out of that. But because we operate in such a siloed environment, so often we miss that opportunity.
yeah, and I think and this is not to hate on McGill or anything, but they've the geology department itself has gone much more now down an environmental route, in the
Mm,
sense that there still is like, you know, igneous petrology and all these things being taught there and everything on the geology side. But it's just kind of one of those things that, I look at the education I got there, which was, it was very like hardcore research based. You talk about not being ready to go into mineral exploration. I was not.
yes.
But it was this very cool foundational geochem heavy um, education that I received. And now I kind of look at more of the kind of the professorship that they have there, and it's deviated strongly from that. And
Mm,
I even think that when I was there, like how cool would it have been to have had the knowledge that metallurgy, process mineralogy, like I know that these things are all very different, but that existed because, I come from like 60 minutes outside of New York City. I mean, doctor, teacher, lawyer,
mm,
business person. I mean, these were the jobs that like I thought that I was going to do. So going to McGill was already like this big kind of huge step
yes.
change of things that I could do. Like, oh my God, wow, I could travel around the world, go see volcanoes. Like this never occurred to me before. So, and I think even though at like an even smaller piece there, once at McGill, you know, not knowing because I wasn't in the engineering department, but not knowing that even
Mm,
these things existed. I mean,
yes.
that could have, yeah,
Yeah,
so
change
much,
things.
so many cool
Yes.
things. Yeah.
Yes.
Now it's a little bit late for that. I'll keep my current job. I have cats to feed, but
Yes. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
very cool.
Yes. I mean, I think one thing, key point, I think to me in terms of my journey, which was interesting. I mean, I know that you use this podcast as a way for kind of like a mentoring for people and they or the younger generation. I think one of the key point for me was actually it's the, I mean, I was looking back because I've been working for a long time now. So in terms of the whole work and the flow, and as I said, like I didn't feel much bump into the road, but I think in many cases I've been changing my job many times. So I've been in between jobs, moved between different locations. When I was in GK, actually, we gone through a very rough time that actually we had to sack many people and all of that. So I've been through those processes, but the reason I'm saying that actually I didn't feel any bumps, it was more about, I think, having kind of a planned move and understanding all of those uncertainty that exist around me in terms of me prepared for those and have always a plan to change things when things are not going according to what you already planned. So essentially, in my idea was actually always you have to be ready to pivot to different directions when it's needed, but have those pivot points ready to your satisfaction. That don't be forced to pivot to things that you might not like it. If you're prepared, you can do that. If you're not, then you might come up with surprises. Then you have to take path that actually it might not be planned or it might not be interesting for you. And I'm not saying that this is the only way that should be done, because I think I'm type of person that I need to be in full control of what's happening and what I need to do. Whereas some people that say, oh, that's very boring because you already know what you want to do for the rest of your life as well, and you keep planning that. I mean, that's one way. And I think the other one, which seems to be cool, but I don't dare to go that way, is you don't do a plan as much and then you have fun with whatever happens, which is another way of living as well. But I think in my case, I didn't feel much bump because I had all of these options set up. So then when things didn't work in one way, then I would basically pivot to that another direction. But it was all planned in a way that actually I wanted it as well, which
I
I
think
think is interesting.
that's super fascinating because, again, I would say, coming from a background where I didn't even know that mining was something that you could do, right? I didn't know that that was an industry. Um, I feel like I was kind of always struggling to catch up, right? And just being like, oh, okay, I'll try out mineral exploration. I'll try out this. And then getting caught in like a bunch of different cycles. But knowing that, once I got into the mining industry, that I found it really fascinating. I loved the science of it and just wanting to
Mm,
stay in there. And so just I would say the other thing too that's really hard, especially as a young geologist, is that there's a degree to which you have to grit it out in the sense that you are going to be retrenched, which is a nice word for to say
yes,
fired. So you are that is going to happen to you, and there's not
exactly.
always a lot that you can do to plan for those 3, 6, 8 months. Hopefully in the sense that it's not longer, but that you don't have work, right? And
Yes.
I would say, the one thing that I decided to do after leaving my last job was that I decided to go into the consulting space in the sense that I felt that I had built up a strong enough network. And I also didn't really feel confident in the ability of a mining company to be able to retain me through downturns. And I thought that I could have a somehow,
Mm,
as I sit here completely stressed, have a less stressful life going forward by living within people's vendor systems. I thought that that
yes.
was the better way to go, not being an overhead. So at a certain point, I also took a look at my life and was like, okay, how do I give myself kind of this stability as well? Um, and maybe that should have happened sooner.
Yes.
But also, again, you say some people plan for it. I mean, my mind's a little bit chaos. And maybe I think though also, when I did this for mentorship, it was the fact that I didn't have somebody who was aware of this industry. And I think that, not everybody coming into our industry is super aware of how it functions and what the ins and
Yes.
outs of working in the mining industry and all of its surrounding industries mean. So I think this is what it's also for, like kind of maybe somebody that's coming at not knowing and is like, oh my God, like how do I get employed? I mean, it's not going to be easy. But once you get going, again, I would also say, definitely plan for it. have an
Yes.
idea
Yes.
where you want to go, and that's
Go. Yes.
helpful. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I mean, also one of the area, I mean, this is something that actually I always have that discussion with my daughter as well. Like, if you find, it's not always easy to do, but if you find what you enjoy from that job, it's not like the job itself is not important, but there are things into the job that actually you enjoy. Like, for instance, in my case, I'm thinking when I learn new things, when I share that learning with others, that's where it's my most happiest essentially time. It doesn't matter if I'm looking at a programming or if I'm doing the sensor or if I'm teaching mineral processing. When I learn and I share that learning through any of those activities, it essentially gives me the joy that I need. And that actually makes you passionate about your job as well. And then all of those ups and downs actually, it's not becomes very important. And always you will find a way through all of that, because I don't think anybody's life is going to be as smooth and fine, because always they're going to be bummed. But if you have that drive and you know what you do is joyful, then you always find a way to do it differently and in a different way.
Such a great point, because, and oh my God, we could probably talk about this forever, and we won't. We'll get to tea time soon, guys. But one thing I would like to say is that for me, I identified when I was leaving my prior job that I loved geochem. I wanted to be in geochem. How do I do that for me in a way that I could, plan at least the next 5 to 10 years, right? And so I agree. It was about finding what I enjoyed and then building a strategy around that. But if I didn't enjoy this, then that would make things really
Yes.
hard and not worth
Yes.
it, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, so great. Such good advice. Guys, look, this is part of why I wanted him on. It was just, I don't know, I loved learning from you. Your course, to me, number one, I wanted to learn about the subject matter, so that helped. I think most of the time my mouth was on the floor. I was like, no way. But also, you just have a way about explaining things that's just, oh. All right, let's continue.
Yes,
so,
let's go. Move on.
Before we get into the heavy stuff, you mentioned you were drinking tea. What are we drinking?
Actually, my tea actually is an exciting story, because I was a heavy black tea drinker when I was in Iran, because tea was the big thing in Iran as well. And then I completely quit that. And then when I came to Australia, I got exposed to different type of herbal teas and all of that. I mean, in our Persian culture, actually, herbal tea has a big place as well, especially they use it as type of medicine or something like that. Like when you catch cold or you have stomachache or something, then always your parents give you another type of herbal tea and say, this is good for you. And the number one problem that I had with those was most of those herbal tea, they taste horrible. So you don't like it at all. Right. But I came here and then I exposed to all of these different type of herbal teas that each of them, they have very nice flavor. So I got into the habit of now mixing and matching different mix of teas together and brew them together. So creating all of these different tastes. And the number one problem that I have is I cannot recreate any of them. It only happens once. Because I don't measure the portions or how much I did with what, because I think there's a specific thing in terms of which one you put first, which one you brew, how long, and then you add the next one. And I'll do it all random. So always I get a taste that actually is a bit different from the last time. So it doesn't get boring. Sometimes doesn't come up very good, but usually it's very good. The only problem is I cannot repeat them anymore. So this one that I have actually is a mix of apple tea, chamomile, and there's one which is berries mixed together.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm here for that. I think later tonight, I got this delicious white jasmine something when I was out in Colorado. Oh, yeah. So I don't have it with me currently, but that's what I'll be drinking a little bit later. So
yeah, that's cool. I mean, this one actually I have from Turkey. Actually, they have these apple tea, which I got first introduced when I was eating in one of the Turkish restaurants, and I looked into the whole market to find them. And it tastes very interesting because it's a bit of a sweet, soury type of flavor. And then when I mix it with different type of teas, it gives a very nice flavor to everything. So that's, to me, it's kind of one of my base ingredients that I use in all of the teas.
Because I would say too, so hashtag America, we put everything in a bag. Um, Interesting. Anyway, point being is that like if like you'll just get like a bag of apple and you're just like, this is really not doing anything for me. But it's interesting talking about the layering effects
Yes,
of this with it, because otherwise I'm like, apple, like I like apples, but like I could leave it. But that is an idea to layer with other things I've never
exactly.
considered. Okay.
Yes. Cool. That's
Now
the
that
tea.
well, now that we talked about that, that was a nice segue there. But now it's actually tea time. Kettle Sat, let's see what you brought.
Yes. I mean, there were a few things as we discussed before as well. I think I mean the one I would share is my personal experience, because when I went first to I was graduated from my bachelor's degree, so I was a mine exploration essentially engineer, and because we do all of these essentially mineralogy and all of those essentially understanding of what type of mineral you have, what type of rock do you have. So the number one thing that you get always when you go to operations is essentially the established engineers, they want to try you and they try to fool you as well. So they want to have a bit of a laugh. So when I went first to an operation, and they say, oh, what's your name and all of that, and then what do you do, what courses have you done and all of that. And then it's okay. Oh, we got this piece of rock. Can you tell us what is it? And they gave me a sugar cube that actually was coated with this correction liquid. And it was a bit tricky thing. I said, this is very delicate. We just found it in the mine. It might be very interesting. And essentially, I was looking into that for almost half an hour, trying to figure out what it is. So not thinking actually it might be a sugar cube. So because I was so much into the mineralogy, I said, okay, I'm good at that because I got a very good mark, so I should know what it is. And then eventually they said, the good geologist actually always licks the rock and they can understand what it is. So you should lick the rock. So I said, okay, that's fine. Let me just try that. And then it turns out to be very sweet. And I said, okay, so now what you guys are doing. So this is a sugar cube. So, and that becomes a very story for everybody. I said, okay, this guy has been thinking about this one for almost half an hour, not trying to give up, that actually doesn't know what it is, and was dealing with the sugar cube to find out what type of mineral is this. So
This
that's my story.
this takes me back to field school. My first field school I ever went on. First of all, I had never been in the woods before, but that's a different story. That's not where we're going with this. But the last day of it was just more of like a practical in the sense that it will explain the map that you made, explain the cross section, and then can you identify some of the rocks? Because we had been looking at, there was probably like 6 different not formations, like just like rock packages or something that were throughout this area. And so they handed me this rock, and I'm just looking at it, and again, just holding it, looking from all angles. I am still not great at identifying rocks. It is just not my strong suit. Anyway, I'm just looking at this, and I kind of remembered something that I think some of the older students had told us from like prior years at field school, that they try and trick you sometimes.
Yes.
And the one that I was considering for a while, because it had clasts of different rocks in it, and it had this gray matrix. It was cement. And they just picked up off the side of the road, and I'm just like, oh my goodness.
Yes. Yes. I think it happens to all of the people that actually they go through the geology. It seems that actually it's a kind of a trick that everybody has to have that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's fine.
A little bit of hazing.
But I never do that to anybody because I hate it.
I don't think I would either. Yeah, it's kind of cruel. But at the same time, I had also kind of like ding 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 off in my head remembered this. So it was also just kind of like, well, Sam, if it looks like cement,
you should say it's
it
cement.
probably is cement. But yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for dishing some tea and talking about all of this mentorship. But now, topic at hand. So your work sits at the intersection of mineral processing, automation, and systems engineering, areas that really often feel pretty far removed from what geochemists and geologists do. But in reality, we're all trying to describe the same thing, but we're just doing it from different ends of the mining value chain. So whether we're building a Geomet model from drill core or optimizing a float circuit in the mill, the challenge is going to be the same. How do we translate this geologic variability into process performance? So, Mohsen, before we get to the technical Q&A side, could you tell our listeners a bit about what drew you to focus on the connections between mineral processing, digital transformation, and automation, and why bridging these worlds is really important for the future of mining?
Yes, I think for me, again, this was a kind of a journey as well, like the way that you mentioned. I was very much focused in trying to leverage modeling and automation to improve the processing plant. That was my focus for a long time. And one of the challenges that I faced was actually, in most cases, I could see that actually your processing has a bigger potential, but we never managed to reach into that. I've been working many operations. I've done lots of this process optimization, but I was never happy because you never can reach to the maximum that it's achievable. Always there are losses in operation, especially in the processing plant. And over the time, that always was a question for me in terms of why we can't actually leverage all of these technologies that we have, all of these cool gadgets that we have, and unlock that full potential. We minimize the losses. And essentially, that's where, when I came to Australia and to GeoChemISTea, because I got exposed to geology group, to all of the mining groups as well. So I started getting that bigger picture. And I think that was one of my key drive in terms of, without integrating from when you know what is in the ground to how to process it in the processing plant, and carrying that information when it's needed for optimizing your processing. We can do all the best that we can in the processing plant, but without that knowledge that we have upfront, we are not going to be able to unlock that full potential. And in my mind, actually, in these days and age, actually, we are in much more critical path, because all of those discussion around the carbon footprint and managing essentially our carbon footprint, the demand for minerals and supply of the minerals and all of those needs, while we are essentially addressing the environmental impact that our activity is having, it requires a step change in terms of, you need to make sure that you essentially try to get to zero waste and loss into your whole process. And in my mind, actually, the only way, which is coming from my experience, is the only way that you can unlock that is if you can leverage all the information that you have for efficient decision making. And when I'm talking with the industry, always I say, this is all about the decisions that we make in our process. And if you don't make efficient decision making, then we're always going to have losses, whether it's resources that we lose or energy or whatever it essentially we utilize. And the number one barrier actually is the information. And as we discussed in the course as well that we had, I started realizing actually we are not short of information. The only problem is actually when you look at all of the data that already exists at exploration, at the geology side, even the geochemistry, that is your space that you're working as well. There are lots of knowledge there that actually, if I understand them and I know them, and I have them in hand in the right time, I can use them for correct decision making, and has influence in my processing in terms of how much energy should I apply for releasing the material that I want. Where do I need to send those materials? What type of forces, gravity forces, magnetic forces, or chemistry I need to use to separate them? If I essentially I can leverage that information, I can actually minimize the waste downstream as well and make the process efficient. And I think that's the number one reason that actually I'm focusing that space now more and more, in terms of leveraging all the information, but linking them to decision making, efficient decision making.
I love that. Just so much to think about. So look, in terms of geochemistry, most of our audience were geochemists. We do work with geoscientists in general on these geologic alteration, geometallurgical models, but as we've been talking about, mineral processing engineers seem to live in this kind of parallel world.
Yes.
Could you help us understand what priorities are from the processing side and what kind of data matters to the mill? Where does geochemistry fit or not fit into the workflows in which you guys use every day?
Yeah, I think it's a very quick question. I mean, I've been thinking about this one when we discuss about the podcast as well, because I'm not very familiar with geochemistry, but I can understand it a bit. Uh, to me, I think when you look at the processing, one of the key points that I keep talking, and this is a very fundamental shift again in our GeoChemISTea since almost 6, 7 years ago. Uh, we always used to think about, okay, we're going to have mining, then extraction, then we have comminution, classification, flotation, or leaching. And we have all of these departments in our center as well. We had comminution group, we had flotation group that actually have been working that space. Then 6 or 7 years ago, we kind of have a bit of a fundamental shift in terms of we are not, if you look at the whole mining, we are not here to do our own bit in isolation. I'm not here as a mining engineer just to extract the material out of the ground, or I'm not here load and haul to drive the material to plant, or I'm not here just to break the material pass to the next level. Essentially, we all want to extract the valuable material out of the ground with minimal loss. So, and that's, I think it's a key point. If I'm looking at the mineral processing plant, I'm not talking anymore in terms of, okay, I'm here to, and what is important for me, I'm not here to break the materials, get it to the certain size, and then do the separation technique. From the beginning, I'm targeting to extract what is value out of that material. And I'm not talking about valuable material, I'm talking about out of value. Essentially, even the piece of the rock that it might not be useful for one side, I need to see how can I turn it to value for another thing. And that's, I think, the key point. So if we thinking in the processing in terms of we want to extract value, then the question is, what information from geochemistry or geology can help us to understand and realize the value that we want to extract from that material? And in my thinking, actually, I mean, for many cases, we only care about the assay and what's the metal content of the material that comes to the plant, because it's easy to measure and it's a common language, everybody understand it. And then we say, okay, we give you this many percentages of copper, or we give the ore with this basically grade of iron ore, and then you plan for how you want to separate it. Whereas the geochemistry has lots of information, especially around the behavior of the material that is related to the chemistry of the material and the texture of that mineral that we are dealing with, that can inform the design of my process in terms of where and how much energy do I need to add at what point to be efficient, to be able to extract the value that I want from that material. And what type of process downstream is going to help me with extracting the next step of the value from that process. And I think that understanding is very important, because then it enables me to use all of those additional information that geochemists and the geologists actually they have, and they use them for their own analysis, but we don't use them anymore. We just condense everything to grade and probably the type of ore that we are dealing with, whether it's weathered or not, and then we send it to the downstream without all of the other information that is very useful.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to, and I remember too, this is off script, guys, but I remember too in our course of how you said that geometallurgy means something different to every mine, every person almost. So it's kind of like when I think about geometallurgy, and in particular some of the block models that we try and create for these, for these downstream processes, like we're trying in each block to input information that is multidimensional, right? It's more than just the grade. It has information about, what rock type it is, what perhaps what kind of texture it has, if it has information about BWI. So what I guess my question is here is, is a model that is giving you that kind of information enough, or are we still missing something here?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good question as well. And that's, I think it's my main reservation about the Geomet.
Mm.
Uh, because as I told in the workshop, Geomet now, because it's such an established word in the industry, and I came across this cool term, spray word. Uh, I'm doing a science of education, and then the course instructor said many concepts in education science actually became a spray word that people just spray and doesn't have no meaning. So
Mm.
Geomet or digital twins, and there are all of these spray words that actually exist in our industry as well. So people, they might call them buzzwords as well. I think the spray word is it's interesting one, because essentially Geomet, when you go, people, they talked about Geomet, but everybody means a different thing from Geomet, and they have different meanings for them and different use cases. But overall, in my when I look at the whole methodology, is yes, Geomet tries to use all of these proxy indices that they develop, like VWI or crushing index or recovery index and all of that, and then try to average the response of a block to those type of indices. In reality, actually, if we want to, the way that I was suggesting in terms of we should look into extracting value, we can't deal with the averages. We need particle level information to be able to make decision at that point rightly, because the processing plant does not treat average material, it treats particles. And if you want to try to guide it by average information of like what the information of the average of the material, there will be always problem, because you either over essentially implementing things or under implementing, because there's only one probably particle that is in the characteristics of the average. Everything is above or below that. So, and we need to know particle level information, and condensing all of those information into averages and through proxies, it's a number one problem. I think that's why I see those models are not adequate. And that's one of the reasons that actually most of the Geomet programs also, they don't last long enough. So you go and do the Geomet work, and then 2 years later, all of that falls apart, and then you have to redo that. I mean, that's essentially probably is a business for some people that they like to do it every few years. But to me, the losses is there, because it doesn't give me what I need. And that's why you keep redoing those Geomet. And I think that's why I started thinking we should also avoid using that same term, because I think the Geomet is such a word that actually everybody thinks differently about it. We need to make sure that RO talks about key points that is important. And then what we can use is we can use that to drive our processing to the right decision for those rocks that fits to the plant. And in my view, the information that is already generated at the geology and geochemistry side is enough. It's only about matter of the matter is actually to be able to carry those information with particles and feed it to our decision making. And those are the two missing points in my mind, in terms of we don't have a good decision making system that actually can leverage that information, because they have been developed over the years based on average information and ore grade and those information that used to come from the geology, whereas we need to change that. And also being able to preserve the information from the geology and mining to the processing plant. This one actually is not that hard. Already there are lots of technologies, we have solutions that we can do that. In the decision-making space as well, we are making lots of progress in terms of developing models that they actually use those information as opposed to proxies and average information.
Yeah, I guess now what I'm thinking though is, okay, so when you get handed everything over, it's your turn. Uh Everybody else is
That should
done
be like that.
with it. Yeah.
That should be like that, actually.
Yeah. I guess, you know, I, I guess the kind of the issue that I'm having right here of where I'm having trouble following,
Mm.
so I guess number one, do you like things like the bond work index? Do you like things that are other already established? So there we go.
Yes,
Nobody can see
no
it. He
one
just
book
shook his head
index. I don't
no.
like
He shook his
it.
head. He's like, no, I don't like it. So we're doing tests, if you will, at the scale
Yes,
of the rock. And you're saying that the fundamental issue that you're having here is that it shouldn't be at the scale of the rock. It needs to be at the scale of the mineral. So how do
particles,
we
yes.
then particles, excuse me. So then how do we go how do we change this paradigm, if you will? Because I think it's also a paradigm shift because we're doing rock
Yes,
testing and you need particle testing. So
yes.
how do we be more helpful towards what our end user really, who is you, how do we be more helpful for that?
Yes. I mean, I agree with your point in terms of there is a paradigm shift here. So we have to change the way that we do things. And I mean, I might sound a bit more advertising about GeoChemISTea, but our state actually always has been about that, changing the industry paradigm. So when you think about mine to meet or Geomet, that was essentially, we have been thinking that way as well. So those are the paradigm shift that happened way back in our industry. It started talking about, okay, we should talk geology and metallurgy together, or we should talk mine to meet together. So we should do the same thing, and we are looking into that space as well. In my thinking is it's a kind of a parallel work that needs to happen in all of these spaces in terms of the sensing and the characterization that happens in the geology space. We have to start thinking about, okay, do we really need to measure at the particle side? What technologies that actually now is available that can give us those additional information or new information? And at the decision making also, we have to think about, okay, what decisions do we need to make? What information help us to make those decisions correctly? Not just thinking about, okay, what information the geologists can give us and then look into, okay, how can I use them for decision making? And in most cases, because we don't understand them very well, or it's not very easy to correlate them, then we go with all of these kind of proxy tests like bond work index or drop rate test or whatever it is, which is a proxy. It's not really a response of a material. It's not really a characteristics of the material. It's a response of the material to a certain way of testing, which is different. And it's interesting because I have two PhD students actually looking into breakage behavior at the particle level. And we have a geologist friend that actually we work together as well. And it's fascinating to see actually how much simpler it is to understand the behavior of the particles when you start going beyond just let's see how the rock responds to a certain way of breakage. When you look at the fundamental level in terms of when I apply the force, does the force actually passes through the boundary of the mineral or goes through the mineral itself? And then linking it to the properties of that mineral in terms of the chemistry and the texture of the rock, you can see actually how easy to correlate it. When I'm saying how easy, it's not like easy, but it's much easier than trying to develop these proxies and correlate them, which cannot be generalized as easy. Uh, so I think, to me, the paradigm shift comes into thinking a bit beyond what is simple and easy to do at the moment or is well established. Look into what technologies is available, what additional information we can take out of that if we didn't have all of the knowledge of what they're gonna do with our data downstream. And then the downstream also had to think about, okay, I'm not thinking about what you can give me, but lets me think what actually is the best way for making decision. And if I want to make those decisions, then what information do I need? And that's where I say there's no handballing information and you walk away and it's my problem. We have to work together in terms of if I'm making these type of decision, these are probably the information that it would be helpful, and I need to tell what decision I make. How do I make those decisions? Because then the geologist can tell me, oh, actually for that decision probably this information is more useful, or if I measure these things it's going to be helping you with that type of behavior that you want to understand. So essentially I think what we have to ask is how we want to manage the behavior of the particle in the processing essentially side to extract the value, and then say if we want to manage that behavior, what properties or information can help me to be able to manage it, and then work with our geologist friend in terms of which information can help me to understand that behavior as well.
And I think something that's also important for everybody that's listening, and you never know who listens to, but is ultimately what we're trying to do here. Yet the science of it is fascinating, but at the same time, what we're trying to do here is to reduce the bottom line, and we're just trying to save money.
Yes.
So it's I love it in the sense too that it's sometimes you see some research projects and it's just kind of like, okay, well, what was the contribution here? And it's kind of unclear, but this one would be, to me, it's pretty clear. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is to save mining companies money, which is great. So
yes.
I love that it's so tangible as well.
And one linking point there also is very important because there's a big discussion around the circularity of the economy as well. And again, that's one of the areas that it always keeps my mind busy, because we are talking about circularity, but still our economy is pretty much linear in terms of resources industry. We just extract material from the ground and pump it into the market without understanding what's going to happen to that material through the whole life cycle. And again, that material is originated from the ground. So all of that information that exists in terms of the chemistry and the texture and the elements that exist in there, how different elements they are actually connected to each other in that essentially structure, is going to essentially have effect in terms of what's going to be the behavior of that material downstream when it goes into the product. And to me, when you think about circularity, you need to start leveraging all of those information to define the pathway of what you extracted from the ground through the whole economy, and manage that whole life cycle in terms of how much can I use it to extend its life? How much can I use it for repurposing it? When it comes to the recycling it, what essentially needs to happen to make it easier for that recycling? Because at the moment, many of the recycling attempts is very expensive, not environmentally friendly, because we didn't actually manage it from the upfront. And we leave everything to the last bit. And I think that's the mentality in terms of, okay, I extract material, pass it to the next person, that's their problem. They do their own bit, pass it to the next person, that's their problem. Whereas everybody has to talk to each other, because small tweaks in some of the parts might make the life of another person much easier. And when also all look at the value add, if you look at it holistically, sometimes it makes sense, a bit more expensive step within the whole cycle for the benefit of overall. And I think that's why my point is actually everybody has to look into the value add and value extraction, as opposed to I'm just getting this piece of metal and send it to somebody else. This element goes to the next person.
That's so true. Oh, I couldn't agree more.
And
it
that's
comes
where
back
I
to
think
silos.
to me the linking geology and everything else actually becomes more critical. We don't think it at that level at the moment.
No, we definitely don't. I think it's such a huge stepwise change, even that we think now in geology honestly, it really only for us took a decade, I feel. But, to have so many more people to be thinking in terms of kind of the next step, right? So we've kind of, in this sense, already started to link geology with the Geomet step, but now understanding probably that that's not far enough or in the right direction, and trying to figure out how we pivot. So there is appetite for it. And I think once you start saying things like saving money,
yes,
maybe that's how we get people more to listen.
Correct. Exactly.
So at GeoChemISTea, you're known for developing models that simulate, optimize, and control mineral processing circuits. How do you see these evolving with artificial intelligence?
Yes, I think this is an interesting one as well. So I'm a big fan of AI, but also I'm a big hater of AI as well.
I think that's the same for everybody.
Yes, I think it's everybody. Yes. I think for us in JK, we try to rationalize the use of AI and machine learning. I mean, these are the concepts that actually, yes, the general public probably got exposed to that more and more in the recent years because of the Gen AI and being accessible to general public. But as many experts do, they know machine learning algorithm, AI has been essentially in industry forever. I mean, when I was doing my bachelor degree, actually, got excited about machine learning. I've done a very stupid work trying to replicate a very good model with AI. And my professor said, you're stupid because we already have this fantastic model. Why you go down the track of that machine learning? Because the model is there. And I didn't realize it at the time. My point is it's a very long history, but I think what for us was actually try to rationalize the use of it, because when there are good understanding of the processes, then developing models that they are semi-fundamental or semi-empirical actually is much easier because they are less data intensive, they can extrapolate much better, and they can generalize much better. So you can actually scale them to different applications with not much effort. But there are gaps that actually AI can help us. Like one of the areas that we have been exploring recently is actually many of the calibration effort that we used to do, which requires significant amount of data collection to be able to calibrate a semi-empirical model. AI is very good in those type of applications in terms of if you have a model and series of prediction versus some essentially actual values, then actually you can use AI to calibrate the model without needing lots of surveys that is done in the plant with controls and all of that, which is very expensive. Or adjusting prediction of the models based on a trained machine learning algorithm, or extracting some knowledge out of the data when they exist, but you don't have good models. So I think that's the area that we are working. And I believe actually many people started after that initial hype, started rationalizing the use of AI. In general, I think to me is the integration of a model-based approach and a machine learning-based approach. And actually, if you integrate them together and use the strength of each of them to overcome the gaps and shortcoming of the other process, then or other tools, then you are essentially a winner. And that's the area that we are looking at, because it's not one for the other. Because to me, AI has abilities, but they have gaps. A model-based approach has abilities, but has gaps as well. And if you integrate them together, then you leverage that. And that's our space in GeoChe that we develop. And I mean, one area that actually we kind of took up the hype of Gen AI is being able to capture a long history of knowledge that already exists in our center, because our center has been operating since 1976. And if you look at the wealth of knowledge that exists in theses, in papers, and reports is huge, but not everybody is knowledgeable of all of them. And these Gen AI algorithms actually, or generative AI algorithms, in my mind, actually, they are kind of smart archives that actually they can make those accessible. So that's one of the areas that actually this year we started exploring in terms of developing our own Gen AI. We call it GeoChem, to extract the gem out of the knowledge that GeoChe has, to be able to disseminate and share that with our industry. Because one of the key points for us is the impact on our industry. And I think sharing that knowledge to the industry is very important, because then people can leverage that as opposed to being hidden in books and theses and files.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, our industry is horrific at sharing. I think a lot of what our industry doesn't realize, I say it often, but is the value in the people as opposed to the value of the data, right? Yes. So it's pretty cool to see that there's an initiative like this starting and see what people kind of take out of it.
Yes.
Do you think that, we're talking about now harvesting all the stuff that you guys have been doing, but do you think that we're moving towards an era where these kind of geologic and processing data sets could be integrated from the drill core all the way to the concentrator? Or what do you think? What are some things along the way that we got there?
Yeah, we certainly move faster. I mean, I'm a bit optimistic, or I might be optimistic, but I think if we are moving much faster with the advances that happens in all of the tools. It's not necessarily only AI. To me, the digitization, which has progressed very fast, it created an opportunity for us to integrate those information and data that exists across the whole value chain. And I think as we get more and more a specialized type of AI algorithms, I think we're going to be able to start seeing opportunities in terms of how we can actually integrate things together as well. So, I mean, one of the areas that I'm keen to see hopefully develop very fast is become these generative AIs that they are specialized and experts in one area of industry with understanding the concepts, understanding the basics and all of that. Especially if we can combine them with some of these advanced logic systems as well, which can help them as well, then I think we can see lots of opportunities. I mean, in other industries, in terms of developing new chemicals or like decision making into design for engineering, AI has helped a lot in terms of thinking out of the box. And I think if we come up with some good tools here, we might be able to start finding ways that actually that human might not be able to see all of that. Because one of the experience that I have with Gen AI is actually because they can actually explore a vast amount of knowledge. They can actually pull up information that a human brain might not be able to connect them. And not all of those connections make sense, but us as a human expert, then we can look into them and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense, or this has a leg, or this doesn't make sense. But I think being able to tease out all of those, it's an opportunity. And I'm thinking actually we're going to fast track to that direction.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point in the sense that, and I see it in my own work too, how I integrate using AI into, a lot of times I use it for report writing, just to speed up things, right? And there's a lot of times too where you'll catch it and you'll be like, whoa, 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 you got to stop here.
Yes.
Like, because now you've just gone off into some fantasy land where this isn't. But
Exactly.
but sometimes too, asking it, throwing a graph in there and asking it what it thinks about that data based on the other things that it knows.
Yes.
It can sometimes pull out things that you just either have forgotten because, you read it in a textbook so long ago,
Yes.
or it's just legitimately a pattern you didn't discern from it. And I find
Yes.
that the combination of my tacit knowledge with its ability to recognize patterns, and then additionally just take, my
Mhm.
slashes of notes about how I want my introduction to sound and make it into something coherent. I mean, I've found success in
Yes.
that, but at the same
Yes.
time, there's only so far you can get, say, with something that's more of a general system, like say ChatGPT, but having something that's really truly geology focused would be, oh, that'd be really
Exactly.
cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think you cannot take the human out of that equation because
Agreed.
uh, for me, I've done a bit of a research to understand what's the Gen AI, where they're going to head, and what's the difference between them and human AI. And I think we know now that actually the human intelligence is completely different from artificial intelligence, especially the generative AI. So therefore, you need both of them. But yeah, as you said, like Gen AI can take out things that actually you might have missed it, you read it, but you knew it, but you can't remember that. Or it might actually genuinely take out some of these new patterns that you haven't seen them. Doesn't mean that necessarily all of them are correct, but you, with your essential experience that you have and the human intelligence that you have, you can identify which one actually makes sense, which one doesn't make sense, or which one actually I have to throw it out as well. So, but the combination is very good because it can make us much more efficient.
How do you go about educating your students about this? Because I
Very good
mean,
point.
us, well, you more so, but us as people that have spent longer in the field, and we know, this doesn't make sense, this won't make sense. Oh, let me take a look at that because this looks a little fishy, but it could be okay. But a
Yes.
student is not going to have nearly that experience where they're going to be able to call it out.
Yes. I mean, that's a tricky point because, I mean, I'm a bit advocate of integration of AI in our education and also our research. But interesting enough, I get lots of criticism from my colleagues as well in terms of this is a dangerous area. Students, they need these essentially some certain level of skills to be able to use these type of technologies as well. Uh, in my opinion, I think I agree with your point in terms of the students might not have the same level of knowledge and skill which means that actually we need to put safeguards around the use of the AI when it goes beyond that scale, which could be actually having experts also reviewing those outcomes. But because of that fear, we shouldn't essentially exclude the students to be able to use them. And to me, it's about helping them first to, I mean, that's one of the key points for me. Again, Gen AI is not the solution to everything. It's a tool. It's like a calculator that we have, but it's much more powerful, or a program that you have, but it's more powerful. So if we train the next generation to understand actually what is really this tool and what it can do and what is its limitation, which is, I think, is very important. Once you do that, then you already build some safeguards in the student in terms of when they use that AI to be a bit more essentially careful. And then you have to start putting those safeguards on the top as well. It's pretty much, if you use a tool for your work, then you always try to make sure that actually there are all of those safeguards around it in terms of when the outcome is coming, is it validated? Is it somebody actually certified that? And the more critical is that outcome, then you have more and more controls into that as well. And I think that's the area that I'm pushing in our education system, because I want to make sure that our graduates are qualified with using AI and Gen AI, but they know how to do that. And we are working on that one as well.
I love that. Because I agree. It's not about sheltering. And I'm putting that in quotes for people that can't see this. It's not about sheltering, graduates from it. It's here, it's helpful, but it's about teaching them how to remember their training as students, in the sense of, having, questioning things.
Yes. But, I think one thing that we have to be prepared as, I'm telling to myself as academic, but also the professionals, that there are going to be certain skills and capabilities that we needed them before Gen AI, that they're going to disappear. And I think we have to be ready for those as well. So there are going to be lots of resistance in terms of, the good engineer should know how to write very well. But in my mind now, with all of these tools, probably that's not anymore as valuable. A good engineer should understand very well the written document, understand that actually does it give you the message, but not necessarily probably have the good skill to write it very fluently or very perfectly, because that essentially already people like Gen AI can do that to a very good extent. So, there are certain skills and capability that they're going to disappear, and we have to be ready for that. And to me, I think that's also one thing that we have to be mindful. But the issue is actually like when you look at the trend, every time that we had a new tool, those skills started disappearing over the time. But the speed was much slower. So therefore, I think the pain or the consequence was not essentially very quick or very impactful. But with Gen AI, because things are moving much more rapidly, so we're going to see those things actually evolving much faster as well. Probably that actually creates a bit more resistance in terms of why, or people become fearful. But I think we have to be ready for that.
I think, though, something I would say to that is that this is a problem that is more of people of an older generation's problem. Like, even I, as a millennial, I'm not afraid of that. I will continue to adapt as I've been adapting my entire career, right?
Yes.
And in fairness, so have Gen X. What comes before them that we always like to make fun of? Oh my God, the
Gen
boomers.
Yeah, Gen Z.
Yeah. No, but like I'm saying, like the older generation.
Okay. I don't know them.
Yeah, my point is that I think that a lot of this, a lot of kind of the pushback that we get onto a lot of these initiatives comes from a much older generation, of the sense that, their fears aren't necessarily ours. Like, I sit here as a millennial and this stuff doesn't bother me. It's about adaptability, and we're very good at that. I think for as much as we liked as millennials to make fun of Gen Z, Gen Z grew up with the internet, right? Gen Alpha, even more so, right? I mean, these are things that they're going to go into industry or whatever it is, already knowing that they're going to have to continue to adapt. But I think also that's what makes things fun, right? living on the edge a little bit with that stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that I see it as an older person's problem just because of a fear that they're going to be replaced. But at the same time, it's not about being replaced. It's just about adapting. I've worked in technology now for a long time, and with all of it, it's always kind of, at first it was much slower in terms of like uptake and everything, but it was always just kind of this resistance, like, oh, we don't need this because, we can identify minerals, and oh, we don't need this because of that. And there was just always a reason. And the people yelling the loudest were always the oldest people. People that were younger, I mean, some of them could be, a little bit resistant too, but overall, nah, I think
Yeah.
we're all going to adapt and to be just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I respect that actually, like the change, especially when it comes that rapid, it's always stressful and fearful as well. So essentially, you can, I understand why they might be concerned or worried as well. But as you said, I think it's going to happen anyway. We cannot stop that. But to me, one thing that we can do worse is not letting our younger generation, the next generation, exposed to those things and be ready for that. Because I can essentially, as you said, I can shelter them from that. But then when they get to the industry, now they are in the environment that people expect that actually they should know how to do things differently, and they are not. So therefore, we need to equip them. As much as it's going to be stressful or fearful in terms of, okay, I'm not going to be relevant anymore, but I think it's important for those people to know how to use these tools.
Totally. And it's just like I said, it's always just a pivot. It's not that you're not
Yeah.
relevant. And
Yes.
it's always been this kind of confusing thing. Like in geology, people for years have been just like terrified that they won't have a job as a core logger. And I'm like, but isn't the
It's
goal
different.
to become like a geologist that can interpret the results of
Exactly.
that core? So now you're getting
Exactly.
more towards like this quantitative core logging. And so now you can actually take a step back and be like, okay, well, what does this mean in the context of my deposit? Isn't this cooler than going through the
Yes.
core shack? Oh, I'm gonna get, it's
Exactly.
fine. We're just geochemists on here, the geologists, Anyway,
Yeah.
let's
Cool.
do my last question here. If we could fast forward, say, 10 years, what do you think, or more, I'm not sure, but what do you think a fully integrated mine will look like to you? Is it a digital twin of exactly what we're doing now? And the answer to that is I hope not. Is
Yeah.
it an autonomous system that continuously updates itself with geochem, processing data, other types of data? Or do you think it's just something else entirely?
I mean, if you asked me a few years back, I would say it's a fully autonomous system that actually gets the knowledge and then drives all of the decision making across the value chain in terms of where do I explore, where do I blast, how do I mine material, and all of that. And then the human is going to overlook the whole process. Uh, I'm That's essentially probably something that actually is going to happen when you think about the fully integrated. But if I put my current vision is I would this is my preferred option in terms of instead of dealing it up to the point that I have the concentrate or the metal, actually I would like to see a system that actually looks at the whole life of the metal that I injected to the economy to the end. Essentially, you should actually be able to see where that copper that I introduced, which car is it there, when it's going to be basically end of its life, when it's going to come back to recycling and all of that. So that's what I'm thinking. If we get to that point, we are in a very good position in terms of worldwide, in terms of our environmental responsibility and saving the planet as well, while we are growing our economy. So that's where now I'm moving toward to develop it as much as I can. So essentially, not looking into only metal production. I want to have a fully integrated system that actually can understand the journey of every material that I'm extracting from the ground through the whole life, through the whole economy. So then I can drive all of those decisions at different points.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's a very science fiction.
Yes, a little bit, but it also isn't.
But I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It's going to
I
happen.
mean, it has to happen. I mean, you look at
Yes. Has to
even
happen,
from an
yes.
exploration point of view, right? Like there's just for the requirements that governments want for, the so-called green revolution, everything like that. There's just not enough, right? We don't
Yes,
have enough copper. We don't have enough of
exactly.
all these other things. So in order to do what is being asked of us, there has to be this full chain perspective towards it as well.
Yes,
What happens
yes,
when the wind turbine is done because they last for 15, 20
exactly.
years? Like, where does the solar panel go after 10 years? Like there has to be an answer to this, and it can't just be to the garbage dump because that's not productive. So it's
No,
actually an incredibly great point.
yes.
Um,
Like we did a bit of a study before around the nickel life cycle, and we
mm,
demonstrate actually all of these material that goes into the batteries. At some point, you have enough into the economy that actually you could actually recycle them back, even with projection of all of the demand increase. So in many cases, actually, you don't not all of the metals, but not all, essentially, there are some that actually you don't need to keep injecting the same amount every year because there is essentially saturation point. At that point, then you can recycle. But as long as you think essentially circularly around that economy, not just essentially sending it to waste dump, then you can do that. And that's my thinking in terms of we should essentially be able to do that. So then we understand how much metal do we have in the whole economy, where they are, and when they're going to end up in different use cases or end of their life cycle, that then they can be recycled and pushed back into the economy as well. So then we don't need to keep injecting and then sending them to waste, essentially.
yeah, no, it's such a great point. I love it. Let's do it.
Yes, I think my key point is actually if you vision it and you want to happen, then you make it to happen. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to make sure that actually the team in our research team, they also share the same vision and they want to happen. And then I'm pretty sure all of these great minds that exist around the world, then they make it to happen.
And I would say to the skeptics, because especially, living in the US, capitalist, super capitalist country, and you just want to say, okay, but the mining companies are always going to need to pull more out of the ground because that's the way in which they make money. Well, it's like, hey, look at what a lot of the oil companies have started to do. Yeah, they're still
Yes.
drilling for oil, but they've also pivoted into other industries because they
Yes.
realized in order to survive that they needed to. And so I would just argue for that. It's not that we can't still extract metal out of the ground and that there's no need for traditional mining as it
Yes.
is today, but the mining companies themselves, there's money and profit to be had in pivoting. And that's
Yes.
just where we're going to have to go too. So there
Yeah.
you
And
go.
I think if you shift that mentality and also the economy, then the mining companies also, they might think about changing their business model as well. So then they're not linear
Yeah.
anymore.
Mm,
Similar to what many of the oil and gas, they become an energy company now.
right.
So they become commodity managers instead of just being a mining that actually extract material.
Yeah. Well, Mohsen,
Cool.
thank you for being here.
Thank you
Thank you
very
for
much for
joining
the
us
invite.
so much for joining us on GeoChemISTea. I think though that this conversation really highlights just how much potential there is when us as geochemists with some good thoughts, you guys as some processing engineers, we stop working in parallel and we can start working in more of a partnership as you've described and you talked a lot about in your course. So to everybody else that's listening, if you want to learn more about Mohsen's work at GeoChemISTea or Future Autonomous Systems and Technologies program, there's going to be some links in the show notes for everybody to head off, or you could just Google it right now. And for all our listeners, keep our conversations open and make sure, we got to keep the tea hot always. So we'll keep that coming for you guys. I want to thank our sponsors, LK Consulting, and to It's Water and Coma Media for our music. And I'm looking forward to talking with everybody next month.
Thank you very much.